My guest today helped take HubSpot from $200 million to $1.5 billion in revenue, turned around a nearly $300 million business at Brandwatch, and is now CRO and CEO Americas at Brevo, which just closed a $500 million funding round. But the post of his that stayed with me wasn't about any of that. It was about taking a month off to travel across Africa and coming back with 3 simple realizations about what actually matters. That contrast between someone operating at that level of revenue scale and someone sitting still long enough to ask the bigger questions is exactly what I wanted to explore today. Channing, Ferrer, it's so great to have you here on Finding Flow. Huge welcome, and thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I suppose I wanted to start sort of at the beginning. So before HubSpot, before the $1.5 billion revenue journeys, what was Channing at 22 actually like? So what did you want and what did you believe was possible for you?
Yeah, so 22, obviously very, thought I knew everything, but knew very little at that time, I'd say.
Yeah.
I wanted to do consulting is what I thought.
Okay.
And I remember coming out of university thinking consulting helps solve problems. I like the idea of solving problems.
Sure.
That's what I think I want to do. And I knew I liked variety. I've always known that. I like to do a lot of different things, which can, sometimes be a flaw to a degree, but I think it's actually been an attribute for me over my career. And consulting seemed to me like the path to variety. Working with different customers on different projects, had a great internship with a consulting firm and really enjoyed that. So I started down the path of consulting early days. Yeah. And I'll tell you a quick story on this, because when I started down that path, I worked at a company that was an interesting company. They grew very quickly all of a sudden and they went public, and they made some bad choices at the time and led to me deciding to maybe want to try something new. Yeah. So I put my feelers out there and started looking around, and I had an opportunity to go work at a big investment bank doing equity research for Latin America. And I could speak Spanish back in the day. I'm not quite as good at it anymore, but it seemed like a very logical path for me because I had a strong finance background. Or I could go work at this young tech company that no one had ever really heard of before, but they were interesting. And this was back in 2000 or so. So every one of my mentors I spoke to and parents and others were like, go work for the big bank. You're never going to look back on working at a big bank. But it didn't seem exciting to me. It seemed just kind of boring. And this tech company seemed interesting and exciting. So against everyone else's recommendations, I chose to go down the tech company path, and I went to work for them, and I joined them. And I of course, 22 or 21, whatever, I don't remember how old I was, but early 20s, we'll call it. And I didn't do all my due diligence. So I joined and I realized they didn't actually have any customers yet. Okay. So I was in this role of what we today call probably a sales engineer. I was intended to help train their customers and teach the customers how to use the product, but they didn't have customers. Yeah. So the sales team started bringing me along on sales meetings and saying, can you just show people the product? Because you know the product better than I do. So I started doing that. And as I started to do that, I realized that the sales team was just trying to show a bunch of stuff and didn't really know what problems we were solving with these customers. So I started with just asking a lot of questions to make sure I was showing features that were most relevant for the customers. And in asking those questions, I was finding some real problems that they were having. And then I would show how to solve those problems. So I was problem solving, and I really enjoyed that. And very quickly, the sales team said, Channing, just run the meeting for us because whatever you're doing is working and customers are signing up. And shortly thereafter, the head of sales said, Channing, why don't you just be a salesperson because you're actually good at it? And I said, I think I want to be sales. But then I realized what sales is. And sales isn't as I might think of selling. Sales is asking good problems, understanding the core issues that people are having, and then finding ways to solve those problems. And I enjoy a lot of variety because there's a lot of different types of problems that are out there. So that's how I kind of transitioned early days into actually a sales career.
At some point, you eventually landed at HubSpot during what turned out to be one of the great growth stories in SaaS history. So what did it actually feel like to be inside a company scaling that fast? And what was the version of you that showed up for that?
So as I joined HubSpot, I was at a company called Oakley previously, and Oakley was about the same size as HubSpot. We were about 200 million in revenue. HubSpot was maybe 250 when I joined, but kind of 225, maybe something right around there. And I joined HubSpot though because I really got enamored with the people at HubSpot. And Oakley, I had a good team. It was a good company. I had a good role there. I wasn't looking to leave at the time, but the head of sales for HubSpot came knocking and we had a bunch of coffees. And I don't really drink coffee, so we obviously had tea. He liked tea,
Okay.
I liked tea, so it actually worked out well. He always said, "Let's go have a coffee," and then we would sit down and actually have tea.
Perfect.
But we got to know one another, and he was looking for someone who to take on a head of sales ops role, and I didn't really want to do sales ops, but I had done it in
Mm,
my past, and my finance background and kind of that the way I think is kind of very structured way of thinking was a good fit, I think, for what he was looking for. But he also wanted someone with a sales mentality and sales mindset, I would say. So he wanted this
yeah.
hybrid role. And back in the day, that didn't really exist. It was very hard to find, I think, someone who could have a sales background and kind of a finance or operational type of mindset. So I fit nicely into what they were looking for. And what I liked though, and I think what we both mutually liked is the mindset and the approach to growth. And one simple thing that I remember in the process, and it's something that stuck with me and we lived by even at HubSpot, is this idea of success breeds success. And
Yeah.
I would say that a lot at HubSpot. And it started in my interview process. And the thinking was very much, if you want to have a successful sales team, they need to be able to see success. They need to be able to feel that success. And we can't set up goals and targets that are unattainable. We have to set up
Yeah.
targets that are achievable. They feel that success, and then it'll breed success around them as well. And that sort of mindset, I think, was kind of unique. And it's something that I really enjoyed. So when I joined HubSpot, I joined with this intention of taking on a sales ops role, but also knowing that my role was going to extend well beyond just the realm of a typical sales ops type of role. And it really did as the company grew and expanded.
Okay. Okay. Well, another thing you've written about your reduce the drag exercise. So the idea that before you add anything, you should ask what can be removed first. So when you walked into Brandwatch, what was the first thing you cut, and how did you know it was the right call?
Yeah. So when I was at Brandwatch, I had again an interesting role. I was the president of the business, so I was looking
Yeah.
after revenue and products, engineering, marketing, a little bit of everything, really. So we had to look at how do we, and our goal was growth, but efficiency as well. And we were
Hmm.
trying to balance both of those things. We wanted to see some
Sure.
growth, but we also wanted to really build a very efficient business. So efficiency means we've got to continually look at how do we reduce operational friction or reduce
Hmm.
areas where we're over investing that aren't really going to
Yeah.
drive that sort of growth. So one of the
Hmm.
things we always needed to look closely at was product. And what are we building that's valuable for our customers? And what are we building that really maybe isn't as valuable as we may have thought it was? So that was one of the first areas I looked at is on the product side, how do we ensure we actually are as productive as we want to be? And one of the measurements that I was looking closely at the time was the developer output, actually. And so it was a
Hmm.
mix of product usage we were looking at, but then also developer output. And developer output is a really interesting and tricky metric. It's probably one of the trickiest metrics that I've
Yeah.
analyzed because there's a lot of ways to look at it, but if you look at just pure lines of code being published, that's not really the best way to analyze developer output because developers can publish a lot of code, but if it's actually not that productive of code, if that code isn't
Yeah.
going into good products or that's actually bad code, it's not the best way to look at it. So we ended up shifting that mindset because that's how they were trying to look at it was through just pure lines of code, shifting it into really more of a t-shirt sized measure of saying what's the output in terms of a product being produced. And we look at is it as a small, medium, or large, and how many of those products have been released over the past 3 months. We look at them on a quarterly basis. So are they contributing to these larger products, smaller products, and how many are they contributing and influencing? And then the second thing we look at is are those products actually being consumed and used the way we want them to be? So we did cut back on some of our product features and really narrowing in on where the customers wanted to be. And we also had to make some changes on the engineering side to ensure we were really focused in on developing the most productive and successful products. So that was one area that was a little different from my experiences in the past, had been a little more go-to-market oriented, but it was very interesting for me to dive in on the product and engineering side and kind of
Yeah.
analyze metrics in a similar way that we might do it in sales, but obviously looking at different metrics.
Okay, perfect. And so Brevo just closed a $500 million round led by General Atlantic and Oakley Capital. You wrote that the bet was to build around unified data and AI before the market demanded it. As CRO and CEO Americas, what does the next chapter actually look like from where you're sitting right now?
Yeah. So Brevo's a super exciting company as we're
Yeah.
growing quickly. We've seen a lot of success in Europe, but we're still just scratching the surface, I would say, in the US and across the
Mm,
Americas. And for what we do in the MarTech space, we're a little more focused on B2C businesses. The Americas, of course, is the biggest market, the US naturally being
Yeah,
the biggest market for us. So I think as
that's
I
true.
look at our future growth path, there's continued growth in Europe, and we have still a lot of growth opportunities throughout Europe. As I look at the UK, we're just starting to build a team. We just opened an office in the UK. The DACH and German region, we're growing, but still a lot of growth potential, of course, there and elsewhere. But I think what I get excited about is, yes, that European growth, blending in, of course, the Americas growth that I'm seeing us begin to gain traction on. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of our opportunity in the near term. What's interesting, and I was talking to the team about this, is we're very focused on North America and Europe right now. We haven't even
Mm,
touched Asia yet. We
yeah,
have customers in Asia, but we're really not doing anything proactively in Australia, New Zealand, the rest of Asia. And another huge market for us, Middle East, we haven't even touched yet. So there's
yeah,
areas that we just haven't tried to focus on, and that's been purposeful. We need to
yeah,
keep our focus rather narrow, I'd say, as we think about growth. Something that we did, I think, very well at HubSpot as well, is kind of focus in
yeah.
on just certain territories one at a time and then gradually grow thereafter. But I do think the next era of our growth is really going to be continued expansion in Europe and really North America specifically.
Yeah, it sounds like really exciting times and a lot of amazing things to come. So I'm looking forward to following that as well. And yeah, I suppose also you wrote something that I thought was quite sharp. So that Apple licensing Google's model for Siri isn't a failure. It's the clearest signal yet that LLMs are becoming a commodity. And the companies that win are the ones who figure out their real differentiator. So for founders and revenue leaders in my audience trying to navigate AI right now, what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so LLMs are obviously the future of the way we work, I would say. Although they are the way we work today in many cases,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
continually be the future as well. And I think the important thing is there's going to be a lot of different LLMs to pull from and use. And I think over time we'll begin to find that certain models are good for certain things, other models maybe for other items. But it's not a one size fits all approach, is what I'm seeing.
yeah,
LLMs are useful. I use Claude a lot. It's probably my preferred choice right now, but I do use ChatGPT for certain features. I change
sure.
around the models that I'm pulling from depending on the queries that I'm running. If I need
Hmm.
something highly intense, I'll typically use a model that's going to eat up a lot more coins versus maybe
Yeah.
if I need a simple question, I'll go with a simpler model. So
Mm,
I think the idea of leveraging LLMs is going to be, obviously it is critical today, but what I'm kind of getting at is they are fairly interchangeable and we can
yeah.
use different LLMs and different AI companies in an interchangeable way. They all offer different types of models, different size models, different cost basis for those models. And as we look at the way companies like Apple or even Lovable or us even at Brevo leverage these models, we allow you the flexibility to plug and play those different models. And software is still going to be this critical element that sits around all models. And we're going to build software as we are doing at Brevo and as I see other companies do. We're building software that sits around these models and leverages the intelligence of the model using the right
Mm,
model at the right time. And then the software can kind of do the thing that you need to get done. And
yeah.
again, you can apply that in a lot of different ways. If we're doing marketing or if I'm shopping for myself, I still want a software layer that's going to kind of allow me to interact the way I want to interact. And then the model
Hmm.
can sit behind that and I can interchange those models. Either the provider can do that for me or I might have the optionality to do it depending on the product or feature that I'm working on at the time.
Okay. Oh, great insights. You took a month off to travel across Africa and came back with three things. So don't take anything for granted. Enjoy life because it moves fast, and rest is critical. So for someone who operates at your pace, what did it actually take to slow down enough to hear those things? And did anything about you change after that trip?
Yeah, definitely. It was clearly a life-changing experience for me, and I greatly enjoyed it. And I was able to bring my family with me over that month,
Amazing.
and we had a chance to do a whole bunch of different stuff. We got a chance to see a bunch of different cultures, and I still remember. And I was just talking to my kids about this actually last week. We were actually on holiday last week and
Mm,
reminiscing a bit
okay.
about the Africa trip.
Yes.
And there was a day that we took and went into a local village. And the village was houses made of really mud huts.
Yeah.
And these people that lived there were some of the happiest people that we've met.
Mm,
And they had a well that was in the center of the village, and that's where they get all their water. And there was some people who donated money to help pump the water into that well from a local river. They used to have to walk about 200 yards down to the river every day to get that water. Now they had it in this well. But, that sort of
Yeah.
change for them was life changing. But for us, as we think about living that way, it sounds very, very difficult, but they were
Yeah.
extremely happy. They loved the life they lived. They loved living in the simplicity of what they had. They loved the nature that was around them, and they would appreciate the littlest things. And it's the things that I might have missed walking down the street. It's the little pebble
Sure.
that has a nice little color and shine to it. It's these little things that we kind of overlook, and that was the day to day. For them, and that was what they appreciated. And that was just one example of, I think, of some of the things that we had a chance to experience while we were there. It's seeing and learning from these different cultures and different environments and realizing what's really important in life. And it's the little
Mm.
things. It's appreciating those little things. And, I think when I look back on it, I had a chance to really step away from everything and forget about work and forget about all the
Yeah.
stuff that goes on back at home and just appreciate all the little things for that month. And it was a spectacular experience.
It sounds like it's amazing how much you can learn about yourself from experiencing different cultures and experiencing different parts of the world. And also sometimes getting that extra perspective or taking a bit of a rest can make you even like much stronger when you get back to work as well. So that's an amazing story. And I'm very curious because we kind of spoke a bit about it before we started recording, but so really love your background. Love the animals there. And you mentioned there's a story behind it. So yeah, what is the story?
Yeah. So I bring back a lot of little mementos
Yeah.
from all my travels. I like to travel a lot, and you can't see
Okay.
all of them even in the pictures behind me, but you can see this. This is from Africa, actually. That
Yeah.
was from there. I'm working in Paris a lot, so you can see the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
Back over here, I've got my two giraffes behind me, also from
Yeah.
Africa. And I've got a picture that's above me that's from Spain. So on
Okay.
this guy's from Cambodia. This
Yeah.
elephant over here. So again, a
Okay.
lot of different little stories behind each one, and we could spend a whole afternoon probably talking about
Yeah.
all the stories and memories. But for me, it's a way to kind of remember back on all the different experiences I've had a chance to be a part of.
Okay. Amazing. And one final question for me. So this show is called Finding Flow. For you, what does being fully in flow actually feel like? Is there a specific type of problem, conversation, moment where everything else disappears and you're exactly where you're supposed to be?
Yeah. So the idea of flow state is spectacular. It's actually sometimes hard to find that for many people.
Yeah.
For me, there's a couple things that stand out, and one of them is I like exercise a lot. Exercise
Yeah.
is my morning coffee. It's the thing that gets me going in the morning,
Sure.
and I find and I like cycling specifically. I do a lot of other things, but cycling is probably my favorite of them all. And I think I get
Okay.
into that flow state when I'm first of all in cycling shape. If I'm not in cycling shape, I'm frustrated. But when you get into
Yes.
cycling shape and you can get on the bike and just start going, and you feel your legs pumping and just kind of in this mindset of you're never going to be able to stop. In a good way.
Mm.
You feel good about that.
Yeah.
That's the flow state, and it's hard to find that in many parts of our day-to-day lives. But for me, one element of that is time of the day. When do I have the most energy? And for me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
more of a morning person. I have a lot more
Yeah.
energy in the morning. I do my exercise in the morning. I tend to
I'm
get
the same.
closer to that flow state. And recognizing
Yes.
that is really important, first of all. Like, when do you have the energy to get yourself there? But also when I shift into work mode, I do my
Yeah.
best work in the mornings. And
Yeah. Sure.
so if I can allocate an hour of time and I'm working on a board deck, I can get into that kind of work related flow state doing that. And sometimes I really enjoy that as well and just kind of focused. Like you feel like, wow, I'm really kind of humming along on this project, this board deck, whatever it might be. It sounds boring to some, but I can get to a spot where I'm really enjoying, building out those slides or building the strategy for our UK go-to-market
Yeah. Yeah.
plan. It's exciting, but recognizing I struggle to get there in the afternoon. For me, it's a morning experience.
Yeah. That's a really good insight. That's all the questions that I have. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think you've given us some really amazing insights, amazing perspective. I think my audience can take a lot from this. So really appreciate you being on this podcast. And yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Kyle. My pleasure to join.
All right. See you next time. Channing. Bye.